Welcome to another episode of Cadence Fishing TV, and what an absolutely glorious morning. I'm fishing today on the Grand Union Canal at Shrewley. I had a real urge to go canal fishing. I hadn't been for a few months, and one of my teammates put me onto this section. I've never actually fished it before. I've fished up to the north on the canal a lot, round Lapworth and Knoll in the past, and also further down at Hatton. But this stretch is actually controlled by Tunnel Barn Farm, which is a really prolific and famous commercial, and some people might not realise that they've got this fantastic stretch of canal. So it's a little bit of an unknown quantity for me, but like I mentioned, it's an absolutely glorious morning. It's just wonderful to be here. I think it's causing Chappie, the cameraman, a few problems because it's so bright on this side of the canal and a bit shaded on the other side, but we're going to do our best. So I've just spent a bit of time plumbing up, and I've learnt a lot about the depths and contours of the canal, and I'm desperate to get fishing, so I'm going to start off by feeding some ground bait and bait. It was actually quite a cool morning. It doesn't look it now, but it was quite misty when I got here, and it definitely feels like autumn is certainly setting in. So I'm not going to go mad with the bait to start with, and I'm going to cup in some lightly squeezed balls of ground bait that just contain some casters and dead pinkies, and I'm just going to take it from there. So what I learnt about the peg was that it's quite a pronounced slope really from the far bank down to the middle of the boat channel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed one line that's perhaps about, I don't know, 2 meters from the far bank, and then I'm going to feed another line a bit close to the far bank. So I've got two different options, and hopefully when we start catching, it will give me the chance to rest one swim and also try different baits and understand what's going to be the best sort of feeding on the day. So like I say, I didn't squeeze these balls too hard, and it's not a heavy ground bait, so hopefully they're not going to roll down the slope. Hopefully they'll settle somewhere near where I've cupped them in, and it's going to be a good base for us to start fishing and hopefully attract some fish. So I've put 2 balls, and I'm going to put another ball just a little bit further out on this line, and then on my other line, which I'm going to feed to my right, I'm going to feed another metre out. So I'll just quickly do that. And my intention is to loose feed some casters as well, and I've got some worms, so I can chop some worms up if need be, and to try and get a response. And I've also brought some pellets with me, which perhaps is something that you might not associate with canal fishing, but I've had some good success fishing pellets on the Grand Union in recent years, so that's something that we'll perhaps try a bit later on in the session. Right then, so I'll quickly put this one in, and then we can start fishing. Obviously I'm being careful to remember where I'm cupping them in and line them up with a far bank marker. So there you go, I've got 2 lines. They're far enough apart hopefully to keep the separate shoals of fish feeding, and we'll give it a go. I think it's really exciting, the fact that I've not fished this stretch before. I mentioned that my teammate Darren Massey had been catching some nice skimmers and hybrids here. And it is, the canals now are fishing so well typically. There's a lot of bigger fish than what we used to catch, so it's just going to be really interesting to see how we get on today. So I thought I'd just start off with a slightly heavier rig, with a slightly heavier hook and hook length, just in case there is some bigger fish that have come straight onto that feed. Obviously, if I don't catch on it, then I can try one of the lighter rigs and see if that'll help presentation and get us started. But I just thought it was worth trying for 5 or 10 minutes with this heavier rig. Whoa, there's a bite straight away. And it feels like a good fish, so I'm pleased I did start on this heavier gear. I'm just going to take my time. I've not seen what it is yet. Wow, it's a nice bream. Fantastic. He's just wrapped around the line. He's not foul hooked, but how about that? Look at that. Absolutely amazing. That's a bream. I don't know, he's got to be 3 pound. And I actually caught that on 3 red maggots on a size 14 hook. So, what a great start to the session. Let's hope that wasn't a one-off anyway, so I'll try again. And I'll use the same bait, so I'm going to put a couple of maggots on and actually try a fluoro pinky as well. Unbelievable. I just went straight back in on that same line and had a couple of knocks, maybe line bites, then it sailed away, and that's another decent fish. You can see I'm trying to play the fish away from where I'm feeding and away from the shoal, and then a lot of times on canals like this I like to ship along the bank, so that's why I position my roller to the side of the towpath. Obviously canals can be busy at times and you don't want to risk the chance of your pole being broken. That's another beautiful bream. Look at that one, Monty. Looks like a similar size as well. What an unbelievable start to the morning. I'm gonna unhook this fish and hold him up for the camera. So, what a great start. It'd be amazing if this was a match. But it does just prove how important it is sometimes when you're starting on an unknown venue to start the session off with a slightly heavier rig, just in case you did hook a decent bonus fish like that. I'm gonna put that in the net. Well, that truly is an amazing start. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to top up that line with just a bit smaller ball of ground bait and plenty of casters, and just rest it for a second and try the other line. I don't know about you, but I just love fishing early in the morning like this. And on canals, it's often the best time of the day. I mean, you can see we've had no boats yet, there's been no walkers or bikes, and we've pretty much got the place to ourselves. So I think it's a good idea, particularly in the warmer months, to start earlier in the day. And I have to say, sometimes that's been the best catching time. Once you get all the disturbance, then the fishing can become a bit more tough. So we might find that today, but anyway, what a wonderful start already. Well, Tunnel Barn control a good stretch of this canal from the Truly Tunnel, which is right next to where the lakes are, up past the second bridge, which is where we're fishing today. I'm not sure exactly how many pegs they've got, but there must be 30 or 40 pegs. And I sort of spent some time selecting this peg today. You can see it's a wonderful peg for cover on the far bank, and obviously that's going to be a great holding area for the fish. But who's to say? I mean, I just don't know. Maybe there's as good or better pegs closer down to the actual fishery. It's got great access as well on a bridge with a private gate, so it's not difficult to get to the canal, and also the parking's safe. So it really is a fantastic venue. I've started off by fishing about 4 inches over depth, and at the moment the canal's hardly moving at all, so we'll have to see how conditions change as the session progresses. But I had a little bite then, so that's a good sign on my other line. There's some fish there as well. Obviously the flow is caused by the opening and closing of the locks, and just downstream of Truly at Hatton there's a huge flight of locks, and at times this canal can flow really, really hard, so there's different ways of dealing with that, but at the moment it's absolutely perfect. I'm able to hold the float in position really nicely and present the bait perfectly. Oh, and here comes the first boat of the day. And here's the second boat, so looks like there's a few early birds out this morning already. Well, I'll just let the swim settle after those boats go through, but I don't get too fussed about them really. Obviously the canals were built for boats, and I think the fish are pretty much used to them. Just what can happen is obviously it will affect where the fish are in the peg, so as there's more and more boats it might push the fish further up the shelf towards that cover, but I'll continue fishing on that original line, and I might also consider refeeding if I don't get any bites, because obviously the boats can cause quite a big disturbance as they come through. You can see where a lot of the canal's being churned up, and I might need to refeed, but let's just have a look. It might not have bothered them at all. Well, I went back to the left-hand swim, and I'm into another bream. So I didn't actually have any bites on the other line, but I'm pleased to get another fish so quickly after those boats. I think it's interesting, sometimes when you do this, you do find that one line will outfish the other. I'm not going to give up on that right-hand line, because even if I don't really catch on it, it does give me the chance to rest the main line. It's another beautiful bream. I'm glad I'm fishing this bit heavier gear. I've got a 6 elastic on this rig, and it's definitely helping me to play the fish really effectively, because that's another beautiful bream. Perhaps not quite as big as the first two, but can't complain at that. Bit chunky, probably around about £2 that one. Well, that was an interesting comment from Chappie, because obviously he's zooming in on the float so he can see it, and I think he was wondering why I didn't strike sooner, because you might have noticed, but I let the bite really develop. I didn't strike immediately, and I let the float sort of really bury before I struck. And certainly when you're fishing with bigger baits like this, and when you're targeting bigger fish like bream, I think you've got to be really careful not to strike at line bites and run the risk of foul hooking fish. So you can see that that float now has settled quite nicely. I haven't dotted it right down either, because I want to be able to read the bites. And can you see then there was just a little knock then, and it's looks like there's a fish on, so I'm going to strike, and I missed it. How typical is that? Well, that one showed me up a bit, because I definitely let it go, but the bait's not being marked at all, so it might have been a line bite. You can just imagine the fact that we've caught 3 bream out of that one spot already. There must be a good shoal of fish there, and who knows, maybe it was a smaller fish that got in on the action. So I'll just repeat the process and see what happens. This float's a 0.4 gram float, so it's quite a positive float for the depth of water. I'm fishing in just over 3 foot of water there, and I think that's important as well, because it is just helping me to be really positive with my rig placement, and also when I'm getting the bites and hopefully hitting the bites. So I've got a small bulk of shot, which I'll show you in a bit more detail later in the video when we go through the rigs, but I've got a small bulk of shot and then just one dropper shot, and that's really key, I think, when you're fishing like this, because if I'm fishing too deep, that dropper shot will be on the bottom and more of the float will protrude. But I know now that that dropper shot's perhaps just off the bottom, and hopefully it's going to help to aid the bites and connecting with the fish. Now there's something having a go at that already, so I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to wait, and hopefully we'll get a positive bite which we can connect with. If I'm continue to get problems hitting bites, then obviously I'll adjust the rig. So I might change the depth. I might actually take a shot off to leave a little bit more of the float showing. And this also emphasises how great it is to have 2 swims, because it might be just that the fish have just gone a bit finicky, and I can just top up this line and rest it, which often results in a quick fish. So there's definitely fish down there, that's for sure. And we're back in. So I really left that for probably 4 or 5 seconds before I hit it. And hopefully that's going to result in another nice bream. And actually this one's pulling really hard, so just going to take my time by keeping the pole low to the water and just moving the pole more level to the towpath so I can start to ship it back. Oh, it is another nice bream. Monty, you're sitting on my landing net pole. Perfect. That one has definitely got a bit more fight about him. He's not really any bigger, and it's absolutely perfectly hooked just in the corner of the mouth. Well, this is shaping up to be an amazing session already. I had 2 bream on my right hand swim, and I just thought I'd rest that again. I fed it, and I tried a piece of corn on the left hand swim. I've been rewarded with that beautiful hybrid. It's got to be over a pound, maybe a pound and a half. It's absolutely beautiful. So I'm in a bit of a dilemma really now, what line to fish, because they're both producing, but I just think I'll try that left hand swim again with a piece of corn and just see. Looks like that hybrid picked it out anyway. You always got to wonder on days like this if it's a bit of a flash in the pan with all the action happening so quickly. They can also quickly turn off, so I'm just making the most of this and absolutely loving it. Well, I just had a smaller skimmer, about a pound and a half, on my left hand swim, so I've just topped up with a small ball of ground bait and some micro pellets. I thought I'd try feeding some micro pellets just to see what response that got. And I've also thought I'd just try a worm out. And I've gone back onto that right hand swim, so I'm sort of pinching myself really, because we've had such a wonderful start. I think that's 5 bream, a hybrid and a skimmer that we've caught, so unbelievable really for a canal, and just shows really, I think there's so much potential on the canals now. They're pretty much neglected, and the quality of the fish is just unbelievable. What I do find really interesting is the fact that there's very few small fish. You know, when we used to fish these canals in the past and when I was growing up, the main target species was gudgeon and roach, and they seem to have disappeared. And the main sort of school of thought on that is the fact that it was a a zander explosion, and they seem to eat their way through all those small fish. But I think the result is there's obviously a huge head of bigger fish now. It's just really interesting that, you know, we've dropped on this peg today and we're catching such fantastic fish. Makes me wonder if I did set a 2 metre whip up like we used to and fish with a pinky, if there was any small fish to catch. But we've not had any small fish or small fish bites on the baits that we're using today. I had a bit longer to wait then, perhaps had to wait about 2 minutes. But that worm's definitely worked. I tipped it off with a caster. So it's always interesting to try different baits and gauge the response. Bream obviously love worms. I haven't actually fed any worms yet. But maybe the fact that it's a bit bigger target bait can help on a day like this when you've clearly got a good shoal of bream feeding in your swim. I think that might be the biggest bream of the day. It's actually number 7 of the bream, and that's definitely going to be £4, that one. I caught that one on half a dendrobina and a caster. Well, while it's working, I'm going to keep this pretty positive feeding regime going. So every fish or two I'm having, I'm topping up with another ball of ground bait. And you can see that's the ground bait that I'm using. I've got a handful of casters and dead pinkies in there. And what I've started doing as well is I've just been putting a few loose dampened micro pellets in as well. So hopefully that ball's going to go down and break up quite quickly, because I haven't squeezed it hard and it's a soft ground bait anyway. And then those pellets are going to disperse around the area, because even though I'm fishing with a cup, I don't really want to be feeding in exactly the same spot. I'm sort of feeding a general area, because there's obviously a amazing shoal of bream out there, and I don't want to try and get them feeding in a really tight area. I want to spread it out so I can pick fish off from around the swim. But it's just unbelievable. And I'll just show you just quickly a bit about the ground bait while I let that ball settle. This was the mix that I used. 2 census ground baits, super black canal, and this fine monture, which I'm not sure what that means, but it's a lovely mix. It's a light mix, and it's achieving exactly what I wanted. One interesting thing on that is I did mix it up last night, because I didn't want the mix to be active. I wanted it to be quite inert, and I'm just keeping the mixed ground bait in that sealed polythene bag and taking from it when I need it. But it's definitely worked today, bringing those bream into the swim. And what an amazing session. Well, the canal's just started flowing now, and maybe those two boats that went through have got to Hatton Lock, so it'd be interesting to see if that affects the fishing in any way. Well, the pole I'm using today is our CP2000, which is an absolutely beautiful pole. And one thing I love about it, apart from the fact that it's so stiff and strong and light, is the smooth finish on it. It's lovely when you're shipping the pole in and out. I'm using the Match Top 2 with the pole today, and you might want to check out the pole and all the spares that are available on our website. We decided to sell the pole as a standard 13 metre without any spare kits, so that the customer can add whatever they want in terms of a spares package. So all the pricing of the different top kits and sections and extensions are available online. That bream was fighting really hard. I thought it might have been a hybrid, but I don't think so. It's a lovely bream, around about £2, but he gave me a good runabout. One great thing about the pole is we supply mini extensions for them, and I find them brilliant when you're fishing on a canal like this and switching between lines. Just means you can be really positive when you're holding the pole and not run the risk of damaging it. And there's another nice bream from my right hand swim. That one's really dark in comparison to the others. Lots of them have been those lovely bronze bream, but that one's quite a bit darker. Don't know if that's because it's an older fish or just a different strain, but it's got a few battle scars, that one as well, so perhaps it is a bit of an older fish. Well, neglected or not, you've got to say, canals are just absolutely fantastic, and what a beautiful spot this is. And what's even better is I've got the whole stretch to myself. Well, I mentioned about the fact that I'm using a positive rig in terms of the shotting pattern and presentation, and I'll just quickly show you now. So I'll just let that float settle, and you can see that the bulk has settled, and now that number 9 dropper has settled, so the float now is perfectly dotted down. If I put another section on and just push that rig up the shelf, I think we'll see that when the number 9 dropper is on the bottom, the float obviously settles higher in the water, so you can see most of the bristle now is out the water. And I love fishing with rigs like this when I'm on a canal, particularly where you've got a real slope like this and where you're switching between different lines, because straight away now I know that I'm fishing more than 6 inches over depth, so I'd probably want to come back and adjust my shot and my float accordingly. So this is what I'm talking about with the positive rig. So it's a 0.4 rig, and I've shotted with number 9 shot to make this sort of spread out bulk. So that's going to get the bait down quite quickly. And then I've got one number 9 as a dropper, and that's about 6 inches from the hook. So obviously when that dropper's off the bottom, my float is dotted perfectly. But when that's on the bottom, the float will sit more proud out of the water. And I think that's a great rig. I mean, to be honest, I thought I was only going to catch 1 or 2 fish on it, but I've kept catching, so I've kept using it. And I've got some lighter rigs that we'll perhaps need to use later, which I'll explain in a bit more detail as well. So let's have a look at the rigs that I've set up for today. As I mentioned, that so far I haven't had to try the others, but this was the float I started on. It's a 0.4 pattern. It's a homemade float, and you can notice that it's got a a body shape that's quite pronounced, a bit like an egg really, and that's a good pattern for particularly when the canal's flowing. And as I mentioned earlier, 0.4 is a positive really, a rig for this depth of water. You'll notice that I've got a good diameter hollow tip on it, and that's proved really critical today to help spot bites and, you know, read the bites and ignore the line bites. And I've got a carbon stem on that float, which has worked really well. The main line is 0.16mm, which has a breaking strain of around about 5 pounds. So again, pretty heavy really for what you'd expect on the canal, but given how well it's fished and the stamp of the fish, I've been happy to keep that going. And the hook I've used is a size 14 Census 3180BZ, which is a decent sized gape and a strong enough wire to play these bonus bream without any problem. So the other rigs I set up were sort of in the thinking that the fish might become harder to catch as the session progressed, and also to sort of chase them up the shelf. But one interesting thing I'll just quickly show you is, obviously when I've plumbed the depth, I've marked the depths on my pole, and that's the shallower depth where I'm fishing further up the pole, up the bank rather, so sort of 11 to 13 meters deep. And then you can see the difference. It's got to be a foot or more in just a meter's distance back. So when I'm fishing in the deeper swim, I'm obviously adjusting my float. But I've marked that on all my top kits, so all the floats can interchange between the different lines. And this pattern here is a 0.2. I've gone for a more slim design body. Obviously I was going to think that I needed to perhaps present the bait a bit better, and I'd gone for a smaller hook on that. In this case that's a 20 B560 hook, and I was using an 0.8 hook length. But I haven't had to use it today in this unbelievable session. And the other two are just different variations on that theme. So I've got a 0.1 and a 0.3, and it just enabled me to use different hook lengths and hooks. So I've got one set up with a 4 elastic and one with a 5. And there you go. I didn't need them today, I shouldn't have bothered. Well, amazingly, I've managed to keep catching the bream, and I think I've got 12 bream now, plus a couple of hybrids and skimmers. And the sort of feeding pattern of catching a couple of fish and then topping up with a ball of ground bait and alternating between the swims has worked really well. It's just amazing, really. I'm just waiting for the bubble to burst, and I just can't believe what's happening. But I was expecting obviously to catch a few fish first and then perhaps have to follow them up the shelf and under the cover, but at the moment the fish are, well, they're just feeding so confidently. We've only had those 2 boats, so I think that's helped. And I've had, what an amazing day. I just took this one on corn, and I didn't feed any corn initially, but I've started adding a bit of corn to the feed, as well as the casters and dead pinkies, and corn can be such a great target bait when you're catching bream, so that one certainly took a fancy to it. It's got to be 2 to 3 pound, that one. It's been an amazing session, this. We maybe slowed up a little bit. We had 2 or 3 boats, but I can't complain. I'm still catching these beautiful bream. And I think we're going to make this the last fish. I'm a bit worried about keeping any more fish in the net, to be honest. It sounds crazy really, but it just shows what an amazing natural venue this is. And what a fantastic way to end a truly memorable session here on the Grand Union Canal at Tunnel Barn. Well, how about this for an amazing net of canal bream? I'm not going to bring them out for a catch shot because there's simply too many and I don't want to damage them, but I've had over 20 bream, some hybrids and skimmers, so I must have well over 60 pound in weight. Absolutely amazing. Why don't you give your local canal a go? Thanks for watching.